On the FPS Walk of Fame, Wolfenstein 3D stands shoulder to shoulder with Doom when it comes to influence on first-person shooters, but it never quite reached the same level of commercial success or cultural impact as its younger brother. With its first game titled Castle Wolfenstein, the series initially had a greater focus on stealth, in an era before 3D games became widely popular. And it was only with the transition to 3 dimensions and in the hands of id Software that this franchise truly began to make its mark. However, part of this rise was hampered by id Software's preference for Doom and Quake, leaving Wolfenstein somewhat in the background. It was a long 9 years before the series received another game, the excellent Return to Castle Wolfenstein. And after that, the franchise ran through something of an identity crisis, with a free-to-play multiplayer, an RPG for mobile phones, and a game simply titled Wolfenstein released in 2009. Then, in the following year, MachineGames took on the responsibility of revitalizing the series, beginning development of Wolfenstein: The New Order. With a more modern and respectful vision, MachineGames managed to bring Wolfenstein back into the spotlight, modernizing its narrative and gameplay but without forgetting its stealth roots. And in this video, we're going to take a look at what The New Order gets right and where it stumbles. And just to be clear, this review will have a section with spoilers, but rest assured, I'll split the video into chapters and give you a heads up beforehand in case you want to skip that part. And here we meet Captain BJ Blazkowicz once again, a man with extensive experience in taking on Nazis, and who finally gets a more fleshed out story, where Blazkowicz is much more than just an angry face at the bottom of the screen or a mindless attack dog charging forward. Through flashbacks and his own commentary, he reflects on his losses, recalls some good memories, and confronts his traumas. Always remembering that when things get ugly, you just need to inhale, hold it for 4 seconds, and exhale. Wolfenstein: The New Order takes us back to 1946, right in the middle of an assault on a Nazi fortress. And the beginning of this game goes from 0 to 100 in just a few minutes, with an air assault going wrong, forcing you to jump to another plane in mid-air, a sequence that gives the latest Fast and Furious movies a run for their money. And despite the clear suicide mission vibe, the team manages to breach the fortress, but things don't go exactly according to plan. The team is captured, and it's here that we have our first encounter with the game's main villain, General Death's Head. And right then and there, you're forced to make a crucial decision. The team gets left behind and the incinerator is turned on. And in a desperate escape attempt, Blazkowicz is hit by shrapnel in the head and wakes up in an asylum. And inside this asylum, he completely loses his sense of time. Months feel like weeks, and weeks feel like days. It's only when he finally gets out that he discovers the devastating reality. 14 years have passed, the Nazis won the war and now rule the world. And to make matters worse, the resistance is trapped in Berlin. This is where the game truly kicks off, although Blazkowicz's main job description doesn't change one bit. You were exterminating Nazis before, and you keep doing it. But now there's a whole new layer of complexity as he tries to adapt to this new order. And it's in this dystopian, Nazi-dominated version of the 1960s that the game's atmosphere is forged. Imagining a world where the Nazis won the Second World War and gained access to super advanced technologies. An oppressive atmosphere permeates the environments, which are uncomfortably stark, dominated by concrete structures in various shades of black and gray, with the regime's red flag serving as both a sharp contrast and a constant reminder of this new reality. The game's setting reminded me of Killzone, which uses the Hellgast as an alternative take on a totalitarian regime and features a very similar aesthetic. And even though The New Order was released in 2014, it carries the vibe of an older game, which makes sense when you remember that it also launched on the PS3 and Xbox 360. The game was developed on id Tech 5, an engine notorious for popping issues, where textures take longer than they should to load, resulting in blurry visuals at times, even on PC. But that doesn't mean the game is ugly by any stretch. The art direction is fantastic, and the atmosphere is genuinely impressive. There are 16 chapters in total, offering a great variety of environments, taking you through a moving train, a mission in a Nazi-occupied London, an infiltration into a forced labor camp, and even some much longer journeys. And crucially, each chapter brings something new to the table, not just delivering a solid dose of action, but also meaningfully advancing the story. No chapter feels out of place or like mere padding to stretch the game out, and the level design itself is excellent, featuring several truly memorable moments. And even though there's a pretty generous amount of cutscenes in this game, it manages to strike the right balance between story and gameplay. At no point do you get the feeling that the plot is being neglected or that you're just playing an interactive movie. It's a balance that many games struggle to find, but MachineGames absolutely nailed it here. And even though the level design is quite linear, exploration is rewarded with collectibles like Enigma codes, which unlock extra game modes and pieces of gold. You can also find permanent upgrades for health and armor and alternative firing modes for your weapons. Ammo, health kits, and armor are scattered throughout the environments, found on enemies or inside breakable crates. And unlike many other games, BJ doesn't automatically pick up items. You actually have to press the interaction button for everything. And this is something that can easily lead to missed items, especially during more hectic moments with a lot of movement. But over time, you get used to it and start instinctively mashing that interaction button on everything in sight. Still, this design choice deviates from the norm of other games from that era and can break the game's flow a bit at times. Plus, it's just one more thing to worry about, especially on harder difficulties with lots of enemies. And when you enter a new area, you generally have a choice to make. Either proceed stealthily or go in guns blazing at everything that moves. However, by silently eliminating an area's commander, you prevent him from calling reinforcements. So even if stealth really isn't your cup of tea, it's often worth taking out the commanders first before going loud. And unlike games such as Halo and Call of Duty, in Wolfenstein your arsenal isn't restricted to just 2 or 3 weapons. You can even dual-wield pistols, rifles, or shotguns simultaneously, ramping up the damage at the cost of precision. It's also possible to unlock an alternate firing mode for each weapon as you progress through the campaign, which further boosts the versatility of your arsenal, catering to both stealthier approaches and sheer damage output. The pistol, for instance, can fire a burst of shots or be equipped with a silencer, and the assault rifle has a very handy alternate mode that launches grenades. Basically, the arsenal breaks down like this. You have a knife, pretty handy for stealth takedowns, whether up close or thrown, and also serves as a last resort in melee combat. There's also a trusty pistol. With the silencer attachment, this becomes your best friend for silently eliminated commanders and other enemies without raising an alarm. The assault rifle is extremely useful against most enemies, and its grenade launcher attachment arguably makes it the most versatile weapon in your entire arsenal. The shotgun is devastating at close range, especially against heavily armored enemies. Its alternate fire mode makes bullets ricochet, which is fantastic for hitting targets hiding out of sight or while you're taking cover behind a wall or pillar. And the marksman rifle is obviously your go-to for long-range shots. Later on, with its laser ammunition upgrade, it becomes the ideal choice for taking down robotic enemies. And let's not forget grenades, perfect for dealing with groups of enemies. Beyond these, Blazkowicz wields a laser cutter, initially used for slicing through metal gates and panels, but with its alternate firing mode it transforms into another powerful weapon in his arsenal and can be conveniently recharged at power stations. And this excellent variety of weapons makes for a really well-rounded combat experience, enhanced by satisfying sound design, and opens the door to a wide range of playstyles. The New Order strikes a great balance between aggression and caution, letting you choose whether you want to push forward stealthily, silently picking off enemies one by one, or just go full guns blazing and deal with the incoming reinforcements. But given that the AI isn't always the sharpest tool in the shed and only commanders can call for backup, the smartest move is usually to silently take them out and any other enemies you can manage stealthily. Then you can mop up the rest without worrying about an endless wave of reinforcements. And there were plenty of times when even if I was practically in an enemy's line of sight, I wouldn't get noticed. Then again, there were other moments where, despite crouching and carefully trying not to make a sound, an enemy clear across the room would suddenly open fire. Overall, the enemy perception is pretty hit or miss. What's also missing is a proper detection indicator, like you'd find in Far Cry or Assassin's Creed, to give you a better sense of whether or not you're actually being spotted or hunted. At least the combat itself is incredibly fun and impactful, which, at the end of the day, is the most important thing in a shooter. And beyond the solid weapon variety and excellent sound effects, the gameplay is fast-paced, and you're up against generous amounts of enemies. The enemy variety is also impressive. You'll be facing off against combat dogs, soldiers with varying levels of armors, drones, and even mechs. And this is where the weapon variety really proves its worth, since certain ammo types are more effective against specific enemies. And the gameplay is absolutely visceral, so you can expect plenty of violence, explosions, and well, let's just say bits flying everywhere, not to get too graphic. It's combat that goes out of its way to be aggressive and successfully conveys the sheer brutality of the situation. I played on the default difficulty, and at least for the first half of the game, things were a bit of a cakewalk. But about halfway through the campaign, Wolfenstein throws a noticeable difficult spike your way, especially in missions packed with enemies and not a lot of places for cover, the bridge level being a prime example. The game does feature a cover system, but it's not automatic. You need to manually crouch or take cover behind a wall or barrier. And at least when playing on PC, you also have to hold down the Alt key and then choose which way you want to lean out. In a first-person game where you don't see your character's body, it would have been far more intuitive to have a dedicated button to snap in and out of cover, rather than having to hold down one key just to be able to lean. At least you can change the difficulty mid-campaign. Overall, the game offers a solid challenge, and it's definitely worth playing on normal or perhaps even cranking it up a notch. There are no skill points or traditional level up system in the New Order. Instead, perks are unlocked by completing specific challenges, like silently eliminating commanders or landing 40 headshots. And while this can be an interesting way to handle progression, it's not without its flaws. On one hand, this approach feels quite organic, as you naturally unlock perks that align with your playstyle. If you favor stealth, you unlock perks related to that. If you're all about action, you get perks for things like dual wielding and grenades. Plus, this list of challenges encourages you to experiment with different playstyles to unlock more perks. But some of them feel a bit counterintuitive, like needing to perform stealth kills while your health is overcharged, something that typically encourages you to be more aggressive, not more cautious. But overall, I like the perk system, and you don't lose your challenge progress if you die or reload a checkpoint, so you can even farm certain perks if you want to. And after discovering that the members of the Resistance are trapped in Berlin, the mission becomes clear. You need to rescue them and assemble a team to fight back against this nightmare scenario that has become their reality. We get some good characters, and the Resistance HQ, your base of operations, is filled with interesting details, like news clippings from this alternate reality and personal belongings of your brothers-in-arms that help humanize the grim situation. The story doesn't shy away from depicting the full cruelty of the Nazi regime, creating a world that's over the top, yet simultaneously convincing and deeply unsettling. The villains are also well developed, each with their own twisted ideologies, and knowing just how truly horrible and detestable these individuals are makes every bit of progress against them feel all the more satisfying. And even in the midst of all these horrors, Blazkowicz still managed to find a sliver of hope with Anya. It's through the cooperation of the group, which even includes a former Nazi officer, that they managed to piece together the resources needed to keep fighting the good fight. But I mean, let's be real here, it's still BJ who's hopping into a mini-sub and infiltrating a forced labor camp, but everyone in the group has their part to play and pulls their weight when it counts. And now I'm about to dive into spoiler territory, so if you want to avoid those, feel free to skip straight to the conclusion either by clicking on the chapter marker or jumping ahead to the timestamp you see on the screen. In my playthrough, I chose Fergus, and the main impact this has on the story is basically whether you'll be able to find upgrades to boost your health or your armor. It's not a drastic enough change to really justify a whole second playthrough just for that, at least in my opinion. But at least with Fergus's storyline, it's interesting to see that later on, when you rescue him again, you get to witness the survivor's guilt he's clearly carrying. He feels the younger soldier, Wyatt, should have been the one saved, not him. Another major mystery that gets unraveled during the campaign is how the Nazis got their hands on all that super advanced technology, the stuff that allowed them to build such imposing structures, wield advanced weaponry, create cybernetic dogs, and deploy those gigantic mechanical soldiers. It's basically what enabled them to win the war. And they managed this by discovering and stealing knowledge from a secret Jewish society. Fortunately, the Nazis only uncovered a fraction of this knowledge. One of the society's members eventually joins the resistance and shares some of these advanced technologies, which proves vital for leveling the playfield and launching the final assault. And after that, you go to none other than the moon. Yes, you heard that right, you go to the moon to steal some nuclear launch codes. And then, finally, it's time for the showdown with Death's Head. And even though the game clearly ramps up the difficulty in the final stretch, I still felt it didn't quite prepare me enough for the actual confrontation with Death's Head, which can be a real pain by the way. This final boss feels more like a matter of trial and error, especially during its second phase, rather than one where you need to meticulously learn patterns and come up with a solid strategy. Aside from that, I found the ending cutscene a little rushed. If I were reviewing this back when it was released, over a decade ago now, I'd probably have a lot more to say about it, but looking at it now, knowing the game got a sequel, I'm not going to complain too much. These days we're living in an era where remakes and remasters are increasingly common, but reboots like Wolfenstein, Doom, and God of War demonstrate that it's also possible to successfully reimagine a franchise without necessarily being shackled to the same old storyline every time. And in Wolfenstein's case, MachineGames perfectly illustrates how you can revitalize an old franchise, maintaining respect for the source material while modernizing certain gameplay aspects and significantly fleshing out the narrative. Of course, this is clearly more of a niche title rather than a reboot designed to massively expand the franchise and go head-to-head with other games like Call of Duty or Battlefield. Here, the experience is strictly single-player, with several gameplay choices that deliberately go against the grain of those other franchises. And this allows the New Order to be a very focused and competent game in what it set out to achieve. It modernizes the series effectively and the results speak for themselves. The Old Blood followed in 2015, the direct sequel The New Colossus arrived in 2017, and Young Blood was released in 2019. Of course, there are some aspects that could have been better, like the enemy AI and a visibility indicator would have been a huge help for the stealth sections. and a more practical cover system, along with an option to automatically pick up items, would have added more convenience to the gameplay. Still, Wolfenstein: The New Order is a fantastic game and a triumphant return for the series. It doesn't overstay its welcome, it strikes an excellent balance between story and gameplay, delivers a satisfying arsenal and combat system, and features a storyline compelling enough to keep you invested not just with its own narrative, but also in playing the follow-up games in the series. And by the way, I'm already working on a video about Wolfenstein: The Old Blood, so make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. As always, thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.